Let's Power Automate all your D365 and M365 documents. Why that is the case? That is, of course, because documents is what Docs42 does. Here's a different version of this title, given that we have about half an hour now to go through Docs42 and look at the various things that we can do with our software. I was very tempted to call it a speed run, and importantly, a speed run to what? We're doing flexible, intuitive, and powerful document automation. For those of you who don't know me already, my name is Jan, part of the Evangelist team at Docs42, and I'm here today to give you a bit of an introduction and just help you essentially get an idea of what Docs42 is, what it can do, and perhaps pique your interest and encourage you to explore it yourself and perhaps have a chat with us to see whether you can find use in it. Now, some of you I do know are already familiar with Docs42. Can I get, well, I can't exactly make a poll myself now, but can we get some feedback in the chat perhaps if you already work with Docs42 or not? Okay, so I definitely see Christina says yes. In this session today, we'll go from scratch essentially, and just give you an idea of what we at Docs42 typically see in terms of clients and partners generating documents or using documents. And I think this is a good slide to give you an overview because, again, Docs42, it's all about documents and powerful document automation. So essentially, the requirement that does come is, of course, that there's some form of document, and contracts are very popular examples, but even a presentation like this one here can be done with Docs42. Any orders, confirmation, invoices, quotes, reports, I think these are traditional examples. But if there's one thing I learned through working with Docs42 and seeing different client scenarios, is that it seems at the end of every business process, there's really a document, just because documents can take on various forms and shapes. We've got an email, for instance, that you perhaps send out as a follow-up to a colleague or to a potential lead. That is essentially a document. Perhaps you're manufacturing something and you need to print out a label, or you're in logistics and shipping and need a label. In fact, all of these things are documents. So whether you're presenting something, whether you're sharing information, or you need to record information, essentially that's what at least I've seen happen after a process in any business, really, public or private. And Docs42 can help you with that requirement. Now, due to the various different scenarios, we also focus on, well, I should rather say we try and enable a wide array of foci, and that, of course, is visible in our data inputs and system integrations. Here we'll have a look at just what typical data sources are used. Of course, you've got your M365, so Word, Excel, PowerPoint. They can all be used as sub-documents within your template. You can have Dataverse, Power Automate, you've got SharePoint, Business Central, Finance, Supply Chain, anything that's really in the web or digitally accessible. Very likely that there's a connection. We have an open connection in terms of JSON, XML, JSON data sources that we can connect to if your data is accessible online. And then there's also the option for SQL that's typically used in on-premise scenario. But again, there's a big width essentially of what you can connect and what different scenarios require. The templates are managed, as mentioned, within M365. And if all of this, perhaps isn't as tangible, we'll see it in a minute. So don't worry. You should be able to get a better feeling of what that actually means. Because in Word, we have an add-in, and that add-in allows you to essentially work and connect all these different data sources that I just mentioned. And if you want, perhaps share with me on in the chat if you have a certain technology that you're most interested with. I've seen some colleagues from Trust Korea. I know you guys are working primarily with Business Central, so that's definitely an interesting case. And earlier we had Christina who mentioned SharePoint. So all of these are very valid examples of generating documents and using Docs42. The outputs from these destinations can come in various forms as well. So PDF is very classic. If you have an invoice, you likely send it as PDF, but if you're working with a contract, perhaps you want to send it out via a signature service provider so that the recipient can immediately sign the document that you've created. There's also, of course, archiving. Maybe you want to download something right away. Perhaps you want just a blob storage store as an output format, or print something physically. All of these are viable options. And to give you a bit of an idea, essentially there's structured data, and there's a Docs42 template, and then there's the generated final document. And that document, of course, can be handed over to various destinations. So if you need it stored somewhere or you need it sent somewhere, that will be this handing over process in the equation. Now you can trigger this generation. Perhaps also here as background, Docs42 is really a web service, and this web service you can of course access also from different Power Automate is one example, but from various different automation tools. So as long as you can trigger a REST or SOAP service, then you can also call Docs42 and really have it within your own systems or out of the box in the systems that we're looking at here, and perhaps call it via a click of a button, or fully automatize this generation in case some event comes to be. Maybe you add a new data source or data source changes, and then you want an updated version of a document so that you then perhaps generate an invoice and archive it accordingly to the change that happened. We're doing this quite successfully, document generation, and proof of that, I think, is in the over 800 clients that we are servicing. And we do that together with over 100 partners. We work very closely with our partners since we ourselves are solely the product manufacturer. So we're focusing on really the solution itself, on making sure it's safe and sound, and that it performs really well, and of course to see what lies ahead, and what could we do better. Here you see a little picture of part of the community who came together in Vienna for the Docs42 Day this March, and last year actually we were in Salzburg. Now with this overview, perhaps a little look into the template design itself, and we have it here as an example, but I think this should just serve as an overview of what we're looking at live now, because the template design here, I think, is best looked at in just a live demonstration, so you get a feeling on how you would actually interact with it. And the example that I would like to show here is the sales quote out of Dynamics CRM. And without much ado, I guess we'll click one further, and that's time for a demo. Just to pique your interest, after we've looked at how Docs42 works live, we will look at some of our clients and how they use Docs42, or particularly why they do so, as I think that will be gives a really nice impression of what the actual business impact is. Okay, you see already these two sides here in my split screen, or perhaps I will give you a minute if there are any questions so far, anything that you want to get off your chest before I dive into a demonstration. Okay, I don't see any pressing questions. So I take that as a sign to continue with the presentation over here. What we see in front is essentially the two sides of the Docs42 user coin. And that is, on one end, you've got a user who typically maintains these templates that we're working with. And of course, templates are stored in an according M365 format. So here we've got a Word document, but this Word document is essentially improved, well, if I may say, or augmented with the Docs42 add-in. And this Docs42 add-in then allows me additional features beyond the classic scope of what Word or M365 can already do through this interface up here. And we'll get to that in a minute. But just to recall, so this is the user side or the template maintenance side, essentially, while on the right-hand side, we're looking at the end user. And the end user perspective is typically someone who works with the end system. That could be an ERP and CRM system. Maybe you're in SharePoint, you have a content management system, you're in an archiving system, develop intracts and files. There's, again, with a lot of technology partnerships and scenarios that our clients work with. So here we'll just look at the primary dynamic examples. But the end user is typically working within their system and maybe has a certain task. In this particular case, we would generate a quote, and then I just want the quote, and maybe I just want to send it per mail to the client, and I don't care so much about all this background noise and what's happening here. So the needs and requirements are a bit different, since the end user may not at all get in touch with this actual template, and he may not even know how the Docs42 template works. But he doesn't need to, because we automatize this output for the end user, while the person or the persons here that are actively managing this template, we facilitate a way that doesn't require heavy IT deployment, right? That you need to hard code some kind of change the layout, but that you can more or less intuitively and with click and drag and drop and point and click essentially make changes. And that is typically done by the business unit that directly works with or is closest to the actual user case. So to give you an idea, I will just go ahead here and perhaps make this a bit bigger. We're in the quote scenario, and I just opened the solar panels quote just to use it as an example. We've got a couple of generation options here out of the box just from Docs42. This is an app that we installed in CRM, and it's also available in the App Store, Microsoft App Store. And I just generated a PDF. Now, this PDF generation for this particular quote will give me the I don't think, yeah, it's actually this one over here, which we looked up earlier. And I'll give it a second for the pop-up. So, the 34th version in my downloads of this document. And we open this again, close the other one. And again, so we just generated this quote. We open it here in this tab. And now I put the tab on the side, and we can compare the output that the end user generated to the template that, let me show you where this template is actually stored, we have in this SharePoint over here. So if you look at this library, you see that, or the SharePoint side, you see the different libraries we've got, and there's a for sales library, where we separate, different environments. And then if I'm in the prod environment, oops, that's the wrong one. The sales quote entity. So this is the example that we're looking at right now. And this is also the document, the template that I opened. So again, standard Word. And then, of course, navigated already to the add-in up here so that we can see the Docs42 capabilities. Perhaps let me skip over this very pretty first page, but technically it's mostly an image. So I will focus on the content down here just to give you a better impression of, just the features that we have. These data fields, I guess, are pretty, attention grabbing. Oh, okay, so this is, I think, yeah. So this example, this template has been open for more than half an hour. And can you guess what the problem is? It's the security token, you're right, for those of you who guessed in the chat. So the SharePoint security token, of course, expired. So I'm just reopening the same template, and you can actually see that I was not lying. It's this one over here. And I give Word a moment to open. And then we can hopefully access all the data. Now, there we go. Still waiting for the impersonation. So you see the whole system is a bit overloaded. So if you think, oh, why do I have to wait for this Docs42 feature? Trust me, it's the system, it's not the feature. If the feature is slow, then we'll be working on it. Okay, this is not. Oh yeah, there we go. Thank you, Microsoft. Very good. And we're live again. Now, put this to the side. Scroll down again and navigate to the add-in. And now we can actually interact with these data fields, because those are what I assume catch your attention first. And if I double click on it, I will get this bar over here. I can immediately see where this data field is actually coming from. So if I move around, right, and click on different data fields, I can always see and relate to essentially where my data points are connected to and what they represent or where they're coming from. So we've got different data sources. These different data sources have different data points. Now you may wonder, well, where does this data come from? It's a config file, that is this data map, and you can connect essentially multiple templates to a data map. And in this data map, this is your hub of the different data sources that you're connecting. So this should be familiar from what we mentioned initially, and that is the different options that we have for various input formats. We've got Business Central here, perhaps for the Trust Tria team, very interesting table, report data, but also, of course, Finance Supply Chain, entity and report data. We've got CRM, there's web service, options for SQL database, XML, JSON. Perhaps if I just click on it, gives you an idea on how you connect a file. So here you would just paste your URL and can essentially call or also post with an HTTP header your data connection. Now, in our case, I'll briefly open the this CRM data source, because this is what is mostly used in this example. As you see, there's also some SharePoint. We're using Excel quite a bit together with an encryption for the login data and an input parameter that hands over essentially the ID for the specific case that we're of course using here. But essentially, it's very much a CE example, but it's a good example, I think, since the approach on how you get your data and how you can interact with your data is very much similar across the different scenarios. So here I can just opt to select or to show the selected data that I already have from this entity, and you can see that I can give it field names, labels, and I can filter right away. And I can filter also with different data fields that are already connected to my data source. There's 3 tabs on top. One is the license, one is the connection, or the second one is, you would just go ahead if you do this for the first time and connect to your Azure, and then you can go ahead and connect, pick an entity, and then you already have your data, essentially. That's it. Then you can select which fields you want to show up or not show up, and give the whole data source, of course, a name. You can also test this. I can't do it because my user doesn't have the privileges. So if I go ahead, yep, it should give me an error. So yeah, I don't have the permission. This is what that essentially tells me, because the user that we are logged in with here, Selena Bentley, is the account manager, and I may have permission to see this template but not the data. So this is also an example on how you can perhaps restrict certain content. You also see that there's another filter in here. You have filters, lookup fields. You can add dynamic fields. So this is just Visual Basic, essentially similar to the calculator. If there is data manipulation or data field manipulation that you want to or need to make in Docs42, so after or beyond the initial scope of your data sources, you can do that here. And you will see in a minute why that perhaps comes in handy. Now that we know where the data comes from and how you get the bit pieces here, perhaps I should note that you can just drag and drop these data points. So, have a field over here, then I could also move it around again and place it somewhere else. And you can generally interact with these data fields as you would with any normal element. So you can highlight it, change the font, the text size, the coloring, and so forth. And you see that typically you get a very homogeneous design. Of course, here when we do demos, we like to play around a bit and change some of the designs. So you see the odd choice of color here and there. These elements are worth mentioning. We'll double click on it. So this is an automate range, and this automate range allows me to include different conditioning. So here is a condition for this specific data source. You can type it manually, or you can also just go back to the data set that you already connected and perhaps just select one, and then also select the operators and use whatever standard logic that you need. So you can freely type it or select it, again, as easiest for you. And you can also include a repetition. So if you want to loop a given section over a data source, you can do so here. Now, the different types of data, if I have a look at this data field that comes from SharePoint, you see that this is actually a Word document. So if I look at my document over here, at the generated document, you see that this section over here, this section over here corresponds with that data field, because we actually have another sub-document, a different Word document stored in SharePoint that we are pulling in here. And if we go even further beyond this table that we look at too, we see also a very nice presentation, another advertisement, and these sub-documents are all pulled in via those data fields. So you see that this one over here is actually a PowerPoint presentation. So if I just have a look at the different types of data fields, you see there's number, date formats, images, barcodes, all the different sub-documents. Of course, you can have an Excel data source, HTML, bookmarks, and the like. There's a big variety of what you can do and what you can include within your documents, enabling you to essentially have, well, not just be creative, but also display a lot of complexity. Down here in the footer, if I double click, we'll see that this website URL has been transformed into this barcode. So we've got a QR code right here. Again, I can give it a dimension, and can also pick the symbol. So not just QR codes, but there is As I mentioned, especially manufacturing, you may have a need for different code. So there's all these different symbol options that you can generate. And I trust that this gives you an idea of what you can do in these documents. Now, this table, just to give you, well, to help you orient yourself, there is this marked repetition that we have, and if I click on it, you will, it should open. Let me see. There we go. So we have, again, an ultimate range over this first line, and it's just a repetition. So here I'm essentially only designing the first line of this table, and then it will generate, according to the content of my case, all the different lines that I may need. If we recall from this case, the solar panel case, there's 3 products in here, so naturally there's 3 lines of product information. And dynamically, if there's just 2 products or 4 different products, it will always pull the according data. You also have tables that you can, of course, not just tables, columns, that you can dynamically include or exclude. And you see that there's a bunch of logic down here for different types of calculations or discounts that you may want to include or not include. And if I click on one, you see that this is actually a calculated value that we included through the dynamic field option, and the type number allows me to pull in a format string. So you could type it, yourself statically, or you see that this here is actually a reference to the currency data from the data source that we have connected in our data map. So you can also dynamically adjust different formats, different styles. You can give a culture value for your numbering, your date systems, or whatnot, if you're working in different language settings. So again, the idea is always that you have a small team or an individual who maintains templates, who sets this up, typically with the help of a partner, or at least someone who onboarded and trained you on what all Docs42 can do. And then you have the template and the scenario set up in a way that the end user who may be working with CRM just needs to click a button, or perhaps just work with data, right? And then can generate a document automatically in the right format with the right content, and hand it over to the right destination that this person wants. We also have an option here for pop-up. So this pop-up gives me different, also a bit slow to load. So this pop-up allows me to make a selection for a template and which version or which output action perhaps I want. So this is just another way. You could have some custom text here or more sections for the end user to select. So there's another way we could generate a document. Or in this case, for this sales entity, we actually can change to make a 42% discount. If I save this, that will actually trigger one of our Power Automate flows. So in this case, we're generating this quote, and it will be stored in SharePoint. So we should be able to see this in a minute, or well, less than a minute. But another thing that I want to show is just the generation out of Dynamics Business Central and perhaps also Finance Supply Chain, just to indicate or give you an idea what that may look like. So in SharePoint, we've got the pop-up and the button. It's very similar in, to say SharePoint, well, I meant CRM. It's very similar in SharePoint because there's a SharePoint app. But you may also envision Power App. So this is just a very simple interface where essentially you can generate a contract. It's again a very simple example where I just say, oh, maybe generate that contract, and then you can have it sent to this individual. So this is another interface that you can use. Or here in Business Central. So the difference in Business Central, similar to Finance Supply Chain, is that you don't need a different Docs42 button, but we are simply replacing the standard path. So the end user, would typically maybe you want to print something. So we go to preview over here. And now these options are, of course, Docs42 options. And also here, again, you can choose to perhaps send something via DocuSign or Scribble, or maybe you want to store something to SharePoint or blob storage, or, well, again, I will just choose PDF as it's a simple example to generate. And you see that also here there's more options. So in this case, it's just another paragraph of legal information that the end user can choose to include or exclude. But the path to the generation is very straightforward. Similar to our other environments, we have a Business Central solution that you can just install and essentially configure your call, set up, and then that's essentially the whole path that connects the two sides, the server side and the template side. Now this is the template right here, or well, the final document. Again, it's a bit different. It's a different template that we're using for this Business Central example, but the functionality is very much what we just looked at. So this, what we did earlier, perhaps you recall the sales quote that I generated automatically by changing just the discount here in CRM. That's this one over here. So we see that 2 minutes ago, well, the service user Lisa, my colleague, generated this essentially, but that was triggered by me changing the discount here and saving it. So if I open it, I should be able to also see that change, and that should be, yeah, that's right here. So this is a 42% discount. That's essentially that's what's being used here to calculate, where and the one that we're looking at earlier, it's 10%. Of course, the smart observer will see that you would also need to change the subdocument naturally, which I didn't do. But just to give you an example on how you can work with these items live. Given the time, I need to move back to the slide. There is one more thing that I want to at least mention, and that is finance and supply chain. Again, we have essentially the same functionality. And here we have the option for entity data to be generated. We can also do that. So there's a couple of paths. If I just make a selection here, I can go to the Docs42 icon and actually have an Excel generated. And for those of you who work with finance supply chain, you recognize, of course, that this is the print management connection here, where you can then essentially manage your output for these entity scenarios. I will just not do this right now. Perhaps just another indication is the sales orders. And if you go to an invoice, well, let me go to the invoice journal. So if you go to an invoice, essentially here similar to Business Central, you just go to your standard view, but you have actually replaced the standard, in this case SSRS, with Docs42. So the end user may not even know that you have a customized or adjusted functionality and tool in the background. But of course, what you're using and what you can work with and all its capabilities is Docs42 within the systems that the template managers are usually used to, and that is, of course, again, Word or similar. Now, one thing that's also very useful, I should show you real quick, is, so this demo account here has, of course, also an email from, so this is one example of an invoice here that has been sent by email. Just to give you an idea, we generated essentially an invoice also as PDF and attached it. So this is just another example. You recognize some of the structures, I bet. But besides the PDF, we also generated this email. So there's really two templates that have been used. It's a PDF that's being attached, and then there's actually an email that's word-based in this case that you can then also dynamically adjust and send out for your various communications. Okay, now I think we looked at quite a bit. What is important now is I want to get, of course, to your questions if you have any already. And I want to just give you some examples of client cases that I personally find very interesting. One thing is that according to the various different formats and scenarios that documents can represent, there's also not really a restriction to a specific industry. Or, I mentioned some public clients also. So you see that we have some Austrian public offices, also in Zurich, the public law firm, and there's some more government clients. Not all are public reference clients that use Docs42. One I can name is the European Investment Bank. It's one of several European institutions that are actually looking at Docs42 and developing the scenarios. The European Investment Bank already is working with Docs42. I think it's a nice sort of example just to show you the trust and performance that Docs42 can deliver. Not just in the public space. Merck, I think most of you know, in the healthcare sector, we've got hospitals as clients. We've got Flaschenpost. I think it's Germany's largest a beverage delivery service. I think their peaks, they do between like 1 million and 3 million documents per month that they generate. So each order they receive, Docs42 is being used. There is KWS, a very interesting scenario of a large seed manufacturer. But again, this is just an outlook. Over 800 clients, there's 100, I think, references more or less, which are all on our website. So feel free to browse that if you're curious or want some inspiration, because I think they're quite insightful. There's some good videos and interviews as well. This is one quote from a partner of ours, just to give you essentially the gist of it. Flexibility and simplified document generation is really key to provide that in the highest quality and for the various scenarios from ERP, CRM systems, and others. That's what we're working on. And if I go back a couple slides, that is also our business impact and really the key to perhaps to highlight here, because fast document generation and no-code report design is our bread and butter. And that is also what we enable our partners to do for their clients. Some clients are more independent than others, but we have a very big partner focus since, again, we don't do any client-facing work ourselves. So we help, of course, communicate Docs42 and our capabilities, and we help guide clients around Docs42. But if it comes to actually project implementation, there's always, if clients come to us, which they do regularly, we refer them to the best matching partner, so that we know they're in good hands. And there's a lot of our development that's also in close collaboration with our partners, and that is something that I just want to highlight, because without partners, there's no Docs42. That's just how we do things. And for that, now I open to the link. And I think this is a neat summary of that partner mentality. So why perhaps should you become, or at least consider becoming a Docs42 partner? It really comes down to whether you or your clients have a need for document generation. And if you want to simplify your work in that area, if you want to provide something that gives a lot of capability in terms of design, in terms of changing things, something that's easy to deploy, that saves you perhaps hours of staff that you can deploy elsewhere, then Docs42 is the right address for you. We have very generous margins. Our certified partners, get 30% license margins. So if you're again essentially working with Docs42, you boost your recurring revenues as well, since we want to focus on providing a good solution, a good product. But the client projects, that's really where the partners are doing quite some strong independent work, and where we see our job as empowering the partner as best as we can. And of course, we do that in direct exchange, and we foster a very nice community that's really grown over the past years of partners, Docs42 experts, Docs42 enthusiasts, and clients. So you've likely seen us at some events, and if not, or if you're just curious in general, I highly recommend getting in touch and exploring the Docs42 world. This slide I'll briefly show, so perhaps you can pause if you're looking at a recording later, since I think it's a nice overview and again highlights that we're an ISO certified service. You can use us in the cloud. We're Azure hosted in West Europe, but you could also, if you need a dedicated server, that's something we do. And we're also accessible as an on-premise license, on-premise service that you yourself would host. And that's it essentially. So I would encourage you to try Docs42, to get in touch. And I want to give you the option to also ask some more questions if you do have questions or comments. Does Docs42 make sense if I only have a few documents per day? So that's a question I just received. Fair question. So let me answer. So it could be yes, it could be no. It will be yes if you have a document that is very complex, dynamic, that needs a lot of perhaps editing at the end of or doing generation, a lot of adjustment. So we have cases where there's like maybe an annual document that's sent out, but for that document that is so complex in its structure, the Docs42 already makes sense. As a rule of thumb, though, if you have less than 100 documents per month, that's likely it's because we are enterprise geared. So that is something where you got to see that you have break even. Of course, typically there's like a 3-month. Well, it really depends on the scenario and use case. But if you consider the whole process of implementation and getting everyone on board, there's a 3-month break even point that we are observing. But it depends, of course, greatly on the individual case, on how you manage your document needs before or otherwise, and again, what the complexity and volume is. But rule of thumb, if you have 1,000 documents a month that you're generating, Docs42 will very likely make sense for you. Or if you have something that you're not quite sure how to display or generate, then also perhaps have a look. And generally speaking, again, we don't bite. We also offer free trial versions. So there's Docs42, the add-in. You can start right away. Essentially, if you download it, you can have a month free testing. And also, if you get in touch with us, we can provide you with a 1-month server trial as well. And typically, that's used if you work with your clients to set up a POC and really see whether what you see is what you get. That's kind of the approach, I reckon. Does that answer your question? Cool. I think there was also some comments earlier regarding e-invoicing. So that's also something that we've rolled out with the recent releases. So that is if you have the new PEPL or Zugpferd in German standard, we support that. So if you have invoices that you want to provide when PDF with embedded XML or the other way around, we can do that for you. And that's about it. I appreciate all of you joining. You still have a chance to share some thoughts or comments in the chat. Unfortunately, I cannot hear you. I very much prefer dialogue over this sort of monologue, but yeah, I can just encourage you to reach out to us, and we'll be happy to have a call or get in touch. And with that, I wish you a wonderful rest of the week. Bye.